When Black Clover was first beginning its rise in the West, it was met with harsh scrutiny. People were hyper-analyzing every little detail when the anime came out. Whether things were considered an ass pull, plagiarism, plot convenience, or even plot holes, they were overanalyzed, often unfairly. I'll give you an example. This YouTuber here, Manime Matt, suggested that Yami smoking cigarettes with a filter on them is a plot hole, and that is part of what makes the Black Clover anime bad.
Also, fun fact, this show is a fantasy show taking place roughly in the Renaissance era, so why the fuck does this dude have a filter on his cigarette? That wasn't even invented until the 1920s. Like, I guess he just dropped by a fucking 7-Eleven beforehand? Just do some basic fucking research. God. Fuck.
Girl, shut the fuck up. You thought you ate that?
But this is a pretty poor assumption considering that there are various levels of technology shown in Black Clover, and just because an aesthetic or theme of a certain time period is used does not mean that the technology level has to be taken. Even though cigarettes as we know them were developed in the early 1900s, which is far after the Renaissance period, the series also features lever-action rifles that weren't invented until the 1820s, long after the Renaissance period. And we also have Morris's 6-monitor Twitch streamer set up.
Welcome to the halfway mark without Black Clover. First and foremost, I need to apologize to you guys for prolonging this video.
So that really puts the nail in the coffin that Yami having a filtered cigarette is a plot hole. Because it's not. It's just Black Clover has varying levels of technology. In the past, I have defended Black Clover against these claims of plagiarism, plot conveniences, and asspulls. But today, I will be exposing Black Clover's lone plot hole. Keep in mind that I love Black Clover, it's my favorite manga, but I'm doing this video out of love for the series. Now I do want to explain to you what a plot hole is, but before that, I will tell you what the plot hole in Black Clover is. That is that it apparently has been 18 months since Asta and Ino have joined their respective squads, though this is actually contradicted numerous times in the manga, both by statements and other characters, and also the Black Clover timeline itself. And I'll show you my evidence for this, but first I'm going to tell you what a plot hole is, and give an example of what it is and what it is not. A plot hole is defined as an inconsistency in the narrative or character development of a book, film, or television show. Keep in mind, a plot hole is not someone disliking a part of a narrative or not understanding it. It has to be an objective inconsistency. Here's an example of what a plot hole is. In Dragon Ball, Beerus was stated to have been the one to wipe out all dinosaurs on Earth. The plot hole is that dinosaurs have been shown to exist on the planet long after this supposed extinction event. For an example of what isn't a plot hole, I'll use a Black Clover example. This is that we were given the ages of the Dark Disciples at 25, yet in the flashback 17 years prior to the introduction, when they should be 8 years old, they are shown to still be adults. Dante asked Zenon if he is used to using his devil power, even though he supposedly would have had his devil for 17 years at that point. But it would be revealed that the true leader of the Dark Triad had access to time magic, and because of that, there's enough evidence to deduce that these were not plot holes, just ended up being some foreshadowing for the huge twist. Now that I've shown you what a plot hole is and is not, let's go back to Black Clover's only true plot hole, Tabata's timeline error. In chapters 234 and 236, we get two statements from one of the Golden Dawn members, that Ino had been in the brigade for 18 months at that point, which would also mean that it's been 2 years since Asta and Ino had received their grimoires. Now these statements were talked about a lot when the chapters first released because it sort of came out of nowhere, and most people knew that the start of the Spade Saga should have been about 12 months after Asta and Ino had joined the brigades, not 18 months. When the first statement was made in 234, many people contribute that to an error by Tabata or a mistranslation error, but this is not likely the case, as this was repeated in chapter 236, as David made the same exact statement, but it was in a different scene, so he makes the same statement twice. I did my due diligence and looked at the raw scans, but they seem to be saying the same thing, and I know that often the physical releases of volumes will fix translation errors or author errors, but both of these are in the physical copies. Not only that, but these same translations are used in the anime, which means that this was not Tabata making a simple mistake and going with it. Now people would call this a timeline error because we know that during the Star Festival it had been 6 months since the time that Asta and Ino had joined their brigades, and not a lot of time had happened by the time the time skip started, as it was stated that the Royal Knight selection would be 1 week after the festival, and the raid on the Eye of the Midnight Sun and start of the Elf Reincarnation was stated to be only a few days after the Royal Knight selection exam. as that was what was said when Mirio picked up Asta, Luck, and Noelle from the Black Bull's base. When you add the 6-month time skip into the Heart Kingdom, it only adds up to 12 months, 1 week, and a few days of change, not 18 months. Some people would argue that using the Star Festival is faulty reasoning, as the actual statement provided in the manga is awkward. As Julius says that it has been 6 months since Asta and Ito entered the country, which could explain the 18-month statement. But this is of course just a mistranslation, as in the raw scans it actually says entered the country's military, not just entered the country. And this is also fixed in the anime, as it says the same thing, that it's been 6 months since Asta and Ito joined the Magic Knights. This mistranslation in the manga makes no sense, as Asta and Ito have been in the Clover Kingdom since they were babies. It doesn't work for anything else. So despite the mistranslation error, the Star Festival was 6 months after they joined. This is backed up by the fact that we know Asta and Ito got their grimoires in March when the Dandelion Fluffs come out. And we know that during the Star Festival, it is in March, as stated by Yami, and there are Dandelion Fluffs floating around. This means it's been a year since Asta and Ito got their grimoires, which adds up because once they left the Grimoire Tower, they trained for 6 months before trying out for the Magic Knights. I used to justify the 18-month statement by saying that technically, there could have been a hidden 6 months that took place prior to the 6-month time skip. We know that the Elf War was not that long, maybe half a day, so that doesn't add much to the missing 6 months. But what I would used to say is that you could just say that from the time that Julius warned Asta about Parliament, traveling to Gordon's family home, and waiting around for the permits to go to the Heart Kingdom, then maybe that is where the missing 5 months went. While I did seem that these events happened in quick succession, there really wasn't much proof for it. So I used to say that the start of the Spade Saga took place 6 months after Asta met Lolo, and that Asta met Lolopechka nearly 6 months after the Elf War, and it does fit well as a counterpoint to the timeline plot hole. But there are at least 2 statements that negate my patchwork of the Black Clover timeline. In chapter 233, Rill states that the goddess that had saved him was half a year ago. Similarly, Noct says that the war with the elves was also 6 months ago in chapter 266. His statement also appears in the anime, which means it's not likely a translation error. If the war with the elves was 6 months prior to these moments, that means there can't be the hidden 5 months of time passing between the Elf War and Asta meeting Lolopechka, as that would make it over 11 months in the past, not 6. So where do we go from here? We have multiple statements contradicting each other, a plot hole, but despite the contradictions, what is the truth? Is the current event 18 months after Yuno and Asta joined their brigades, or only 12 months and some change? Well, despite the blatant contradictions, there's actually more evidence that 18 months have passed since joining the brigades. The reasoning for this is the Asta and Yuno's age. They are 17 years old after the time skip, and if we use their birth dates and pair that with the timelines, it can only work if it's been 18 months. Asta and Yuno were dropped off at the church on October 4th, and they were newborns. And we know that 15-year-olds are the ones that go to the Grimoire Towers in March to get their grimoires, which means that Asta and Yuno were 15 years and 5 months old when they got their grimoires. They trained for 6 months, making them 15 years and 11 months when they joined their brigades, 16 years and 5 months old when they were recognized at the Star Festival. This is the crux. If we take the 18-month statement as correct, then Asta and Yuno are 17 years and 5 months old, which matches up with their official provided ages. But if we don't take that, and take it as an error, and that only a year has passed since they joined the brigades, then Asta and Yuno are 16 years and 11 months old, a blatant contradiction of their given ages by Tabata himself, which means that the 18-month statement must be true. This is also the same for Noelle, who is also confirmed to be 17 now. Her birthday is mid-November, meaning she's a bit younger than Asta and Yuno. This means that she was 15 years and 3.5 months old when she got her grimoire. This also makes her 15 years and 9.5 months old when she joined the Black Bulls, thus making her 16 years and 3.5 months old during the Star Festival. And if we take David's statement to be true, then she's 17 years and 3.5 months old in the series. If not true, and his statement's in an error, that means she's 16 years and 9.5 months old, a whole 2.5 months younger than the age that Tabata lists her as. So again, this is a plot hole because the plot both state that 12 months and 18 months have passed from the contradicting statements. So what happened? How did Tabata mess this up? Well, as I mentioned earlier, I don't necessarily believe that it is all Tabata's fault, but actually his editor. You see, Tabata was given a brand new editor at the very start of the Spade Saga, editor Iwasaki. This was Iwasaki's first time being an editor, and would be the editor for volumes 24 and 25 that covers chapter 229 to 251. Nearly all of these timeline errors do stem from this portion of the series. David's 18-month statements are in chapters 234 and 236, and Real's statement about the L4 being 6 months ago are contradictory and both within editor Iwasaki's run. Only one of these contradictions happened when the latest editor Fukuda, featured in chapter 266. But he may have actually seen the errors and went with it, hoping that nobody would notice, as going back and admitting the numerous timeline errors may have been too much to do. So yeah, that's my theory for the plot hole. The inexperience of editor Iwasaki caused the timeline errors, and they just went with it. So yeah, there really is no debate. Yes, this is a plot hole, and yes, it has been 18 months since Asta and Yuno have become brigade members, meaning that 2 years have passed since the beginning of Black Clover, when they got their grimoires. Real and Nock's statement provide evidence that contradict and shorten this timeline, but they are outweighed by the preponderance of evidence. As for where to place the missing time, since 1 week and a few days happened between the Star Festival and the Elf Arc, we can round that to a week and a half, and that means that 5 months and 2.5 weeks are missing. That is a lot of time to seemingly just go missing, but we can actually use the time skip material from the anime to show where the missing time came from, or at least some of it. The filler in the anime that takes place after the adapted material of chapter 228 and between that and 229, which is episodes 130 to 157. These are canon to the manga, as they were made in tandem with Tabata's team to explain what happened in the time gap. I know many people are going to complain that the filler is not canon. I don't even want to hear it. Canon does not equal what is released or accepted by the primary author. Tabata has an entire team, and he has to work with his editor, and is privy to sway from his publisher, which partially owns Black Clover. So, he is not the sole arbiter of what canon is. The anime is an officially licensed production, created in tandem with Tabata and his team, at least very closely when it comes to the canon filler. And just because 2 instances in 2 separate episodes made Tabata uncomfortable, does not mean that the entire filler is non-canon. At worst, it makes it so that those specific scenes are non-canon that are referred to, Noelle and Leo using runes before training with them. That is still arguable that those are actually still canon, because uncomfortable does not mean non-canon. Though I don't want to go too far on a tangent, I think I'll eventually start a different video project that discusses what canon means, or what it is in Black Clover, as too many people have skewed opinions on what canon actually is. But before we discuss the anime canon, I want to show you my favorite moment from the canon filler arc.
Thank you, all of you. I understand what needs to be done. At some point, I'm going to Yami.
Anyways, the anime canon adds a lot of time that passes. There are things like the days passing between episodes and days happening within episodes. For example, in Gordon's episode, over 3 days passed in that single episode. And when the Captain's Royale was announced, it was stated to be at a later date, which would imply that it would be something like at least several days later. I tallied everything at a lowball of 6 weeks, which means that in chapter 229, when Asta goes to fight the Spade base, it actually has been well over 6 months since he met Lolopechka. What this means is that the missing 5.5 months has to stem from the time passing between Asta talking to Julius, waiting for his trial at Parliaments, traveling to Gordon's family, waiting for a Heart Kingdom permit, traveling to the Heart Kingdom, and the loads of shenanigans and training that he partook in before heading off to train in the Heart Kingdom for 6 months. Also, the anime canon adds a lot more evidence that, in fact, 18 months have passed since Asta and Yuno joined their brigades, as in episode 152, the episode is entirely dedicated to celebrating the fact that Asta and Noelle have been in their brigades for an entire year. And since Asta trained with the Heart Kingdom for 6 months right after this, that proves that 18 months have passed. And though I've already showed you that a lot of time passed between Asta meeting Lolopechka and then actually going to train in the Heart Kingdom, remember that the time passed because in the anime canon, Lolopechka said that the Spirit Guardians needed to prepare for training. But this is also a plot hole and an inconsistency with the timeline of the narrative, as after the 6 months of training, they said that the Diamond Kingdom was invaded by the Spade Kingdom 6 months prior, even though Zenon invaded the Spade while Asta just had met Lolopechka, well over a month before he started training there, meaning that it's actually been over 7 months since the Diamonds have been invaded. Also, the Elf War was not 6 months ago, it was just under 12 months, nearly an entire year ago within the story's timeline. So remember that when you ever think about the timeline, it's been nearly a year since Asta defeated Zagred, not just 6 months. These statements by Nock and Rill are just plot holes. As for what could fix these errors, just remove these 6 months from their statements, and then there isn't as much of a timeline issue, or just restate them to nearly a year ago. Well, that is unless... Sure, there was something else considered to be a timeline issue, as I mentioned earlier in the video, and while that hasn't been straight up confirmed to be fixed by Lucius being the one in control, we can all but confirm that Lucius was behind those time discrepancies. But does that make it possible for him to be behind this blunder as well? Well, I'd say it's possible, just not likely. Lucius has no connection to this issue besides the concept of time, whereas he had a direct connection to the Spade Kingdom, the Dark Triad, and the Dark Disciples. He doesn't seem to have much of a connection to this. Besides, you'd think that people would realize that they have just woke up and lost 6 months of their lives. There's no way they could forget about that. Oh wait. Come on, Tabata, you menace. Use the ultimate combo spell of Marx's memory magic and Lucius time magic to fix this goddamn broken timeline. In closing, this really is not that huge of an issue, as it doesn't really break the plot. Don't be too mad at Tabata or his team. It's probably the worst time to get a brand new editor starting right at the beginning of a major time skip. I'm sure that the editor, who remember, it was his first time being an editor, he just got confused on 18 months since they joined their squads, and 18 months since they got their grimoires. But by the time the error was likely noticed, there wasn't anything that could really be done, as there was too many contradictions to fix. So this is a contradiction within the plot, an inconsistency in the narrative, two statements claiming that 18 months have passed, while the actual plot shows only 12 months and with statements supporting that as well. Let me know what your thought of this video was. This is Black Clover's only plot hole, and yes, it's not a big deal. I just thought it was a very interesting subject to talk about, because this was brought up a lot when the 18-month statement was originally brought up by David. I don't see a lot of people talking about it lately, but it is there. It's definitely a plot hole, unless if they go back and retcon it. I just find this really interesting, but yeah, just note that 18 months have passed since Us, joined their respective brigades, 2 years since they had actually gotten their grimoires, and just think of the context of what this means. This means that the Elf War was really 1 year ago, not 6 months ago. Please leave a like if you'd enjoy this analysis of this video. I usually do power scaling and theories, but I also want to branch out and do other stuff besides just talking about those things. I want to get more on analyzing the plot and stuff like that. You guys can also please check out my webtoon, and please join my Discord called Bronderheim. We're getting more and more members, and it's getting really fun talking to you guys. I'm in there every day, and I'm going to be even more active in the near future. You can follow my Twitter link down below. I hope you guys all have an amazing day. Peace out.